focus on the margin drivers. If you have to be really cautious on your costs, focus on your products that generate your margin, your highest margin, and manage the rest of your portfolio for cash.
Coffee's for closers only.
So we've established my proposal is sound in principle. Now we're just haggling over price.
Let's see how much we're going for in eBay.
I mean, it's the same as Dunkin' Donuts. Costs 15 times the price.
Welcome to Impact Pricing, the podcast where we discuss pricing, value, and the profitable relationship between them. I'm Mark Stiving, and our guest today is Barry Edney. Here are 3 things you want to know about Barry before we start. He got his pricing chops at a company called Sposea, a consulting firm. He currently runs his own consulting firm called Burning Issues Consulting, and he has lived in 6 different countries. Oh my gosh. Welcome, Barry.
Hello. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Okay. Now you can tell me, how did you get into pricing?
Well, our pre-conversation comes back. I fell into pricing because I complained that our pricing wasn't good enough. So my boss said, well, you fix it then. And so I did. And when the corporate I worked for employed pricing specialists, they decided to run the slide rule over our business unit and went away and said, well, we've got bigger fish to fry. We'll let you get on with it. And I took that as a pat on the back and a compliment, and carried on focusing on the value side of things. I was ostensibly responsible for sales and marketing in Australia and New Zealand at the time, and was really trying to get the focus on value selling, but without, of course, any real value propositions or clear way of communicating what the value was, or indeed even understanding what it was the customer was trying to get done so that we could focus the value where it would help them.
Okay, stupid question. What caused you to recognize you weren't doing pricing well?
I saw the results coming in, and I saw how busy my team were selling. And I knew intrinsically that, I'd worked for I'd come across from a competitor, a UK company, no longer exists, called ICI, and they were very, very good at that practice of, training their people and educating their people, but also extracting value from businesses. They were probably the highest price, most profitable in any sector they operated in, and that was their approach. And so I realized that we can just do this better. Now, I didn't quite always understand what I could do or how I could do it, but I knew there was a gap. And so I just read widely. We tried some things. They didn't work. The biggest issue I saw was that our pricing relativities were completely wrong. You look at we had 2 brands, a sub-brand. We had product ranges within brands, and the relativity to each other and to competitors was completely wrong. And I'd often get, so I started changing the pricing. And one of the first complaints I got from our sales team was, oh, we're too expensive. So my response usually was, compared to what?
Yeah, that's actually pretty fascinating. I heard you say the word selling value several times in that description, which I love because that's the title of my new book. So certainly I love that. But when you think about it, did you recognize that we're delivering a lot more value to our clients, our customers, than what we're getting paid for? Is that a driving factor?
Oh, absolutely. And it wasn't until I moved to a more regional, a bigger responsibility, when I moved to Singapore and started taking care of the same things across Asia Pacific, China, Singapore, Japan, India, that I realized, I was doing some more reading, did my master's at that point as well, and realized that this concept of cost to serve wasn't being considered. So that is only then, when I started looking at cost to serve, did I realize just how much value we were delivering. And that for me was almost a light bulb moment. You when you start measuring the value that you deliver, it is so much easier to articulate it to your clients.
And were you selling the same product in New Zealand, Australia, as you were in Asia?
Yeah, the product's the same. The value you can deliver alongside the product and the benefits it brings are a little different. So, for example,
tell us. I find that so fascinating that we have one product, multiple different audiences, let's say, and they're going to get value or need value differently. So I'd love to hear this.
So, for example, let's take the main product. This was a paint for automotive paint for collision repair, sold globally, big operation in the US, and like all mature markets, UK, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, US, labor cost is high. So you want a paint system that reduces the time it takes to accurately match the color. You want the reduce the time it actually takes to apply and dry, so that the energy cost is lower when you dry the paint. And you want the whole process to be efficient to reduce that labor content, that overhead content. In China and India at the time, who cares? It takes longer. We'll just throw more people at it. The labor was cheaper than the paint content. So the value has to be presented in a different way. There has to be a different value, or a different aspect of the value you can deliver.
I think that is a spectacular example of how different countries are going to need to value essentially the same outcomes, but they're going to value how they get there very differently.
And the same can be said on any mature market. If you take, say, for example, a mature market like the UK, it doesn't have to be the collision repair market, but so, for example, the industrial flooring. I did a project for an industrial flooring company a few years ago, and marketing and product development can assume some delivered value and can develop value propositions for certain scenarios. Their client personas, but until the salesman's in front of the customer making the buying decision, not only does he have to decide which persona he's presenting to, he has to make the final decision and fine-tune that final value proposition. So I get, as a consultant, I get a little bit frustrated when I get asked to help with value selling and the salesmen aren't selling the value. And my first reaction is, well, what help are you giving them? What tools are you giving them? And are you giving them help or obstacles?
Yeah, and probably my first question would be, well, can you tell me what the value is?
Yeah, that's a good question too.
Because what I find is nobody in a company understands the value of the product to the customer.
And my response to that would be, in most customers, it's perceived differently. And you've done quite a few posts the last week or two about perceived value versus intrinsic value. And it's the perceived value, what I believe to be a really valuable part of that product service package, might be completely of no or of no interest or no value to one client, but absolutely sought after by another.
That's absolutely right. And in fact, that goes straight back to the China versus the US type product that we're going to sell. And what has value? Well, in the US, what has value is getting labor out. And in China, that has no value. So,
well, in China, it actually has quite a lot of value today. Back then, it had no value.
Right.
Things change because markets mature, and costs change. And of course, there are other aspects of a product portfolio. It can be presented differently. You just have to find what it is that client values more. In China, fortunately, it was productivity. They had more cars to repair than they could manage in their facilities, so it was throughput. So the quicker I can repair it, the better. So that adds value rather than the labor cost.
And so how do you help companies do this? In essence, figure out which customer needs which product, what they value, and how much they'd pay.
Well, this comes back to my focus of what we do at Burning Issues, which is really look at customer products segment combinations. So have we got the right product for the right customer in the right segment at the right price? Now, right price could mean right for who, but should be right for the customer and right for the business that's selling the product. And so often it's businesses, particularly in B2B, will try and do one size fits all. Doesn't have to be a different product. It can be the same product delivered in a different way, with a different support service, with a different pack size, with a different minimum order quantity. It can be a combination. And we often forget that some of the value doesn't always come in the product or the service. It may come in the way that the way we support the delivery. I had one client who invested a lot of money in R&D in their innovation pipeline, only to be told by the client that no, what we really want is innovation in supply chain. We want Amazon style tracking. We want real time delivery. We want 1 ton tote bags of chemicals with an RFID chip, so the inbound inventory can be managed instantly. That's why we want innovation. The product's fine.
It almost bothers me when I hear someone say the product's fine, and I say that. I say that because I'll go back to the comment I made earlier. They don't understand how their customers perceive value, so how do they know the product's fine?
Well, this was the customer who said the product's fine. My point is that my client didn't ask their client the right question. They asked the question, do you value innovation? Yeah, absolutely, we value innovation. We're always looking for innovation from our suppliers. So they focused straight on innovation in the product they supplied, rather than asking the logical question, what areas of innovation are particularly of interest? So they spent large six-figure numbers, large seven-digit numbers on R&D that client didn't value.
Yeah, that's actually quite embarrassing if we can't understand. And once again, I'll come back to the concept that says people don't know what our customers value. Right?
They don't ask the question. Often they don't ask the question, and often if they do, they ask the wrong people within the client business. So in that scenario, the question had been asked of the procurement team, not of the people who use the product on the production side. So when they challenged the production side as to what innovation do you seek? Well, we're happy with the product. We like your product. It's reliable. It's less troublesome than your competitor. It's easier to use, easier to clean the machines. We have less failures in service. We don't really want to change.
I'm sorry, I got to say, Barry, that story just started to make all the sense in the world when you added the two different personas.
Yes.
Right. So if the product team or the manufacturing team said, hey, the product works great, don't need anything, and procurement's telling us we need innovation, what do you think procurement wants innovation in? Right.
Exactly. Well, yeah. There is so with that client, how we uncovered this, your original question to me was, how do we help customers identify the value that the customers seek? We actually taught their sales team how to interview to identify those value questions, those value requirements, those value needs. And we taught them about perspective and, that difference between, what makes a good car. It's a perspective thing, because if you want to get from A to B, it can be a 12-year-old Chevy. If you want to get from A to B very quickly, then you might be better off with a Ferrari.
Yep.
So it really depends on the what if and the what next. So we taught them how to ask the right questions, how to start with the open questions, funnel them down, and to think about the perspective and what's really wanted. What do they really want, and why do they want it?
Give us an example of a couple of those questions that you would ask, that you would teach them to ask. And you can just stick with the car example if you want.
So we'd start with, well, what are you trying to do? What's the job you want to get done? Well, in this case, we need to put insulating material on the outside of high power transmission cables for the power industry. Okay. And what specification do you need to have for that? And they go through a very technical spec. So then the salesman, true to type, would then follow the product features and benefits of that. So you got to teach them not to focus on that, but to focus on, why do you need that specification? That particular specification that you quoted, why do you need that? Because that's what the clients quote, and they will not accept anything else. Do any of your competitors supply that specification? No, we're the only one that has it. hallelujah. You don't need to worry too much about your competitors, but you need to keep your customer happy. What else do they value? And then it's, well, how, there's all sorts of open questions then. And the real focus we had was on asking open questions and not the closed assumptive reasoning question.
Yeah, it's actually funny. Back a long time ago when I was a salesperson, they taught you how to make the assumptive close or the assumptive questions. And nowadays in our world, we want them to ask these open-ended questions.
It's quite alien for salespeople to do that. And even if you run a value selling seminar, which I do occasionally, you still have to teach the salesman when they're doing their fact finding at the beginning of their discussion with the client to ask open-ended questions. They still want to ask. They still tend to ask questions that they generally know the answer or can make a good stab at the answer, which doesn't add a lot of value to their time in front of the customer.
Yeah. And what I also find fascinating is even if you can get them to say something like, what problem are you trying to solve? Or what's the job you're trying to get done? And they get an answer, they suddenly want to jump into pitch mode. Oh, we do that really well. Let me tell you how we do that.
Yes, indeed. I was when I was taught my very first sales trainer a very long time ago, because I've got quite a big grey hair these days, a couple of lifetimes ago, made me laugh. And he called that wheelbarrow selling. And I said, well, what do you mean wheelbarrow selling? He said, well, you've walked into the customer with a wheelbarrow full of benefits, and you've thrown a benefit at the customer who didn't like it. And then you throw another one at the customer who didn't like it. And you throw another one at the customer who didn't like it. And then you go, oh, no more benefits left in my wheelbarrow. And you've got no more ammunition, nowhere to go. Because to avoid the benefit selling.
I have to tell you that early in my career, I was in sales and I was horrible. I mean, I look back and I'm embarrassed at how bad I was. But as I think about how I used to sell, I would have all these features and benefits all memorized, and I'd be spewing them at the customer, hoping to see some brightness in their eyes to say, oh, that one's exciting to me, right? And you get through the list, you didn't get that excitement. You're like, well, now what do I do?
No, exactly. And I wasn't the best salesman. I was pretty okay. I was much better at managing. I was a much more successful key account manager, managing large clients when it's multi-relationship and it's about the conversations about the what next. Yeah, that's much more my comfort zone. And then that's when I moved across into marketing and product management and optimization and sales management. And that's really where I sort of found my feet. And as I say, ended up taking care of pricing. So because of that work I did when I ended up in Holland at the corporate head office of that company, started leading a lot of pricing initiatives and what McKinsey of the day called commercial excellence. We started looking company-wide at cost to serve, margin optimization, those combinations of customer segments and products. And we took huge swathes of products out of the product tail. And the money we saved and put back on the bottom line was immense.
Yeah. Barry, I want to ask you a different question. This is something I talk about a lot, and you seem ideally fit to express an opinion on this. I often say, look, we want to go sell value. Well, how do we sell value? Well, we have to understand value, and then marketing has to communicate value, and then product actually has to build products that have value. And so I think of this as creating, communicating, and capturing value. And we need to start at what's the customer want, right? What's value to a customer? And then how do we get that all the way back to how do we build products? And in your career, you've been in that entire chain. You've worked your way back from sales to product management. And so how do you think about what I just said?
I fully agree. I think in practical terms, if you think about what typically happens in a B2B industrial business, which is my background, what typically happens is, people intrinsically recognize that you've got to keep innovating new products to keep interest in the customer and keep stay at least different from your customers, if not ahead of your customers. So they're always looking for the next new thing to develop. And the typical route is to ask the salespeople what they want next. Well, all that happens is you get an iteration. You don't get a new product. There's no really new products. And typical career path in most industrials is technical expert, or engineer if it's a manufactured product. Then you become a product manager or a salesman and a product manager, and then probably end up in marketing usually. And so you should know the whole chain. But reality, what happens is sales come back and say, oh, we need a product that does this. So that the product manager, who's a former engineer, says, oh, I know. And he writes a brief for R&D that is actually a work instruction rather than R&D instruction. And this is what I inherited when I took responsibility for the global product portfolio at Akzo Nobel, was my company. And so I killed that dead. I said, no, absolutely not. I want you to go to R&D and describe the problem you're trying to solve. And let R&D come up with something new and creative. And the quality of the products that came out of R&D, the number of products reduced by about 40%, 50%. But the quality of the products improved immensely, and the success of those products doubled overnight.
Yeah, you actually skipped a step in there, because think about this. Customer says, I really need this feature. Salesperson says to product, I really need this feature. Product or somebody has to translate, well, what problem are they trying to solve with this feature?
Oh, well, that's in that company, that feedback, the brief is done, present to R&D, and then R&D marketing jointly validate that with some sample customers. So before they even get to a prototype stage, they've engaged with identified customers of that type that have described that problem.
Nice. That's perfect. And what we...
Well, I wouldn't say perfect, but it works pretty well.
Right. But what we so rarely, and I say we, I mean companies everywhere, so rarely do is step back and think about what are those problems we're solving for our customers. And instead, we like to build products. We like to build features. And
we do, yeah, indeed. And we do, oh, that will be nice. And it's a nice whiz-bang improvement, but it's not really valid. Some companies, I mean, when I joined, when the division of ICI I was working for got bought by an American company, and I shan't name names, one of the reasons they bought the division I was working for in Australia was because I had a certain industrial product range. And there was some inventory that had to be used up. So they said, oh, just make more batches. So fill the warehouse with this product to use up the inventory. And it just sat there because their view was, oh, we're a product company, we're a technology company, build it and it'll be sold. No thought of who might want to buy it or where this product is in its life cycle. Is it still valid? Is it still valued? Is there a demand for it? Can we create a demand for it if there isn't a demand for it? And so there was a big problem there, and they were very much make it and push it out, not so much what does the customer really want or what does the customer really value.
Yeah, we stopped thinking about not you and I, but most businesses stop thinking about customers, and they just get into big trouble for that.
Yeah, they do. Companies get too big and too far away, and they have divisions and units that with the idea that they're going to be close to the customer. But the power of those units and business units and functions have to influence the outcome is not enough.
Yep. Yeah. Barry, we're gonna have to start wrapping this up, but I have to ask the final question. That went quick. I know. What's one piece of pricing advice you'd give our listeners that you think could have a big impact on their business?
Focus, particularly these days with under price pressure, and your end customers are cutting their cloth accordingly because they need to cut their expenditure. Focus on the margin drivers. If you have to be really cautious on your costs, focus on your products that generate your margin, your highest margin, and manage the rest of your portfolio for cash. Just get rid of it, sell it off, and don't have it on your inventory because that's just your cash tied up.
Have you noticed, directly to what you're saying, have you noticed if you go to an appliance store today, you can't buy inexpensive appliances? They don't have the bare bones versions available anymore. It's only the high-end versions. Oh,
I hadn't noticed that because I haven't bought an appliance for a while. But
is that not exactly what you just said?
I think so. Yeah, they're keeping only the high margin products, and those that are making up the volume. Why worry about it?
Yeah, and if you've got limited supply and you can only make so much, you might as well make the ones with high margin.
Indeed, and the those of us that buy, if you're forced to buy a bare bones product, you're probably on a tight budget. So in these current straitened times, you're probably going to make a decision not to replace that item anyway.
Yeah.
Rather than wait until you can afford an upgrade. So that's the right decision. And I'm seeing that in everything from car parts to decorative paints to flooring.
Yeah. So that's good advice. Watch the products that are giving you the big margin. Make sure those are the ones you're selling.
Yeah, they're the ones you need to absolutely make sure you've got inventory of and you can supply.
Nice. Barry, thank you so much for your time today. If anybody wants to contact you, how can they do that?
Get hold of me by email, barry.edney@burningissuesconsulting.com, or you can go to the website and fill in an old-fashioned contact form, burningissuesconsulting.com.
Boy, I want to do that. Thanks, Barry. Episode 175 is all done. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this, would you please leave us a rating and a review? Speaking of reviews, Alexander Musatkin said, the Impact Pricing Podcast brings so much value. Each episode is full of insightful information. Expert guests share their interesting and practical experiences. Thanks, Alexander. I'll let Mom know you did what she told you to. And seriously, reviews and downloads are what help our podcast grow. And for some reason, Apple makes it really hard to figure out where to leave a podcast review. So if you're smart enough to figure it out, like Alexander, we would be hugely grateful. Also, please tell your pricing colleagues about this podcast. I was at Professional Pricing Society last month and was shocked to learn there are some pricing professionals who didn't know our podcast existed. So please share the knowledge with everybody else. And finally, if you have any questions or comments about the podcast or pricing in general, feel free to email me, mark@impactpricing.com. Now, go make an impact.